The submarine drifted in the black stillness, a steel shadow beneath the endless Pacific. The men spoke in whispers, their breaths thick with oil and fear. Then came the sound, a single metallic heartbeat echoing through the hull. Ping! Captain Daichi Sato froze. It was not the ocean speaking anymore. It was something hunting. The sound rolled again, sharper, closer, tearing through the silence like judgment itself. The crew looked to their captain, eyes wide, searching for certainty that no longer existed. Sato's hands trembled as he gripped the periscope. Above them, another world moved, vast, confident, unstoppable. The sonar pulse repeated, methodical and sure, claiming the water inch by inch. Sato realized then this was no longer their ocean. The Empire's reach had ended, and what remained was this hollow steel shell drifting through borrowed darkness. His voice broke the still air, calm yet cracked with the weight of surrender. "The sea," he whispered, "does not belong to us anymore." The silence after the ping felt louder than the sound itself. Every man aboard understood what it meant. They had been found. Captain Sato gave no order. His gaze stayed locked on the ceiling as if staring through layers of steel and water into the world above. Okada whispered that they should dive deeper. But Sato did not move. He thought of his father's teachings, of the sea that once protected them, now turned against them. The hull creaked, metal complaining under the weight of the deep. The sonar operator's trembling voice cut through, bearing 087. "They are closing," Sato finally spoke, his words quiet, unshaken. "Then we hold. Let them come." His officers exchanged frightened glances, but no one defied him. Somewhere above, another ping sang through the dark, closer this time, as if the ocean itself wanted to listen. The next ping hit like a hammer. The submarine vibrated as if struck by invisible fists. Sato steadied himself, feeling each pulse in his bones. He ordered engines to silent run, but the sound still found them. "They know," whispered Okada. Mika's eyes watered, not from fear, but from the relentless sound drilling through her ears. She'd listened to countless ships die, but never thought she'd hear her own death approaching. Sato looked at her, at the young face that had followed him through every patrol, and saw in her trembling eyes the reflection of his own surrender. Time stretched thin between each ping. The world outside was silent except for the heartbeat of the enemy's machine. The crew barely breathed. Every creak of metal sounded like betrayal. Sato closed his eyes and pictured the islands of Japan, the shores where his son used to collect shells. That memory felt impossibly far. He realized then that this submarine was no longer a weapon. It was a coffin drifting through its own graveyard. "We are ghosts," he murmured, and no one argued. Then came a new sound, the faint hum of propellers above. The enemy was lowering depth charges. The crew's fear was silent, pure, stripped of panic. Sato's voice was steady as he whispered, "Prepare for impact." But his eyes told another story, one of understanding. The sea had already decided their fate. As the first explosion thudded far above, he exhaled slowly and listened. The sonar pulse returned, distant but certain, like the toll of a bell. He whispered to no one and everyone, "Would you trust the man who once tried to kill you?" The quarry descended into darker water, deeper than it had ever gone. The hull moaned under pressure, every rivet trembling like a pulse. Captain Sato sat alone in the control room, his thoughts drifting toward the surface he could never return to. Okada stood beside him, breathing shallow, glancing at the depth gauge climbing into the red. "If we go lower, we die," he muttered. Sato didn't respond. The ocean groaned, its weight pressing against them like guilt. Above, the destroyer's pings faded, swallowed by distance. For a fleeting moment, silence returned. The kind that doesn't bring peace, only memory. Mika's voice broke through the quiet, trembling. "We've lost their signal. Sato nodded slowly, his face a mixture of relief and mourning. They had escaped the enemy, but not the truth. The war outside was ending, and they were sinking into the grave it had left behind. Okada found Sato staring at the compass, the needle twitching though the ship no longer moved. "Captain," he whispered, "we should surface at nightfall." Sato didn't answer right away. His gaze was fixed on the trembling arrow, as if it were the last truth left to him. "Surface?" he murmured finally. "And meet what?" His tone was not anger, just fatigue, the kind that comes after too many choices and in death. Okada hesitated, then said, what none dared, "Maybe surrender." The word hung like poison. Sato looked up, and for the first time, his expression broke, not in fury, but in sorrow. "The ocean forgives no one, Okada, not even those who surrender." The silence stretched for hours. The submarine drifted like a ghost through unseen valleys of black water. Mika closed her eyes and listened to the fading hum of the sonar. The faint echoes of ships far away, men fighting battles already lost. In her headphones, she heard something else too. Faint singing. Not human, not machine, just the voice of the sea, deep and ancient. It made her cry softly, though she didn't know why. Sato watched her from across the room and understood. They were hearing the same thing. The sound of the world moving on without them. A loud crack echoed through the submarine, metal protesting under the crushing pressure. The lights flickered. Moro shouted from the rear compartment, "Hull strain! We can't go deeper!" The crew rushed to brace the bulkheads. Water trickled through a seam, cold and merciless. Sato steadied himself, eyes locked on the leaking steel. "Hold the depth," he ordered. Okada looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. "We'll be crushed," he yelled. Sato didn't move. "If we surface now, we die faster." Outside, the deep water roared like a beast. Inside, the men clung to the illusion of control. The ocean was no longer an enemy. It was the judge. Hours passed before the storm above settled. The destroyer had moved on. The pings were gone. Only the groans of the submarine and the breaths of those who remained. Sato sat beside the periscope, motionless. Okada approached, quietly setting a cup of water beside him. The captain didn't drink. He only said, "The silence feels heavier than the sea." Outside, the water shimmered with bioluminescent light, faint blue sparks brushing the hull like stars, sinking into the dark. The war, the empire, the orders, they all seemed small against that vast quiet. Mika whispered softly, "Maybe the ocean belongs to no one." And for once, Sato smiled. The ocean had claimed the quarry, and now it was claiming Sato. The pressure outside wasn't just water. It was the weight of responsibility, of lives lost, of a nation he could no longer serve. He sat by the periscope, staring into the black abyss as if waiting for something to emerge. But nothing came. The silence pressed down harder than the depths around them. Okada entered, his footsteps light but urgent. "Captain, we need to talk. The men are restless." Sato didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the darkness beyond the periscope lens. Okada lingered for a moment, then spoke again. Quieter this time. "They're losing faith in you. They're scared." "We all are." Sato turned slowly, his face weary but resolute. "And what would you have me do, Okada?" His voice was raw, like a man who had fought for so long he could no longer tell where duty ended and death began. Okada's eyes flickered with hesitation, but he spoke his truth. "Maybe it's time to stop running." As the hours passed, the tension in the quarry thickened. Okada was no longer the only one who questioned Sato's judgment. In the bowels of the ship, Moro was muttering to the crew about the madness of staying down here, and Tanabe couldn't hide the look of terror whenever the sonar picked up even the faintest signal. It wasn't the enemy they feared. It was the captain's unwillingness to face the truth. Every time Sato ordered another silent descent into the dark, they felt their hope sinking with the submarine. As Okada passed the control room again, he caught sight of Sato once again staring into the dark void. It had become an obsession. Okada's voice, now quieter but firm, cut through the silence. "You're not alone, Captain, but we can't survive down here forever. You have to make a choice." The first sign of the crew's growing unrest came when Tanabe refused to send a routine sonar scan at Sato's command. "We don't know where we are anymore," she said softly, her voice shaking. "The sonar, it's not telling us anything. I can't hear anything but the sound of the deep." Sato's gaze hardened, and for the first time his voice cracked as he ordered, "Do your job, Tanabe." She met his eyes, her face pale, her hands trembling over the sonar console. "I'm not sure I can anymore, Captain." The silence that followed felt like a weight on her chest. Sato's eyes lingered on her for a moment before he turned away, his mind racing. What was happening to them all? As the days wore on, the quarry became a tomb, the air thick with unspoken words. Sato sat in the command room staring at a map of the Pacific that no longer held any meaning. He thought of his family, of his son who would never see his father again. A voice broke his reverie. "Okada," now more insistent than ever. "Captain, we need to surface. The war is over. There's nothing left to fight for." Sato's hands gripped the edge of the table. "I cannot surrender," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I will not." Okada's face tightened. "We're not fighting anymore. We're just waiting to die." Sato's eyes darkened. "Then let it come. We have nothing left to fear." The silence broke when Tanabe's voice finally echoed in the control room, not in fear, but in exhaustion. "I can't hear anything anymore," she whispered. "Not even the pings." The sea is quiet now. Sato's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. A realization that they were no longer captains of anything. Okada stepped forward, his voice softer now. "It's time, Captain. The ocean has already claimed us." Sato stood, his knees unsteady, and walked to the periscope. He didn't need to look anymore. The weight of his decisions had already crushed him. "Then let it claim us all," he said softly, his voice a hollow echo. The quarry sank deeper, as if pulled into an inevitable grave. The deep hum of the submarine felt like a heartbeat in the dark. Every man aboard had accepted it. They were waiting for death. But not from the enemy. It was coming from within. Captain Sato stood at the helm, his hands gripping the wheel, eyes fixed on the blackness outside. The ocean had swallowed them whole, and the weight of their silence was deafening. The ping of distant sonar echoed faintly through the hull. Lieutenant Okada stood nearby, his eyes narrowed as the depth gauge crept into dangerous territory. "We're running out of time," he said, his voice heavy with unspoken thoughts. "We have to make a choice." Sato's gaze remained, fixed ahead, his mind a whirl of thoughts he could no longer fully control. "The choice was made long ago," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The ping returned, a cold reminder of the surface world they had once known. Moro was the first to speak up, his voice low and laced with fear. "Captain, we've taken too much damage. If we go any deeper..." His words trailed off. There was no need to finish the sentence. Sato knew the quarry had reached its breaking point, just as he had. The air felt thinner, the pressure out suffocating, and every creak of the hull spoke of imminent failure. Okada was standing by the radio, his voice shaking as he said, "We need to surface. We need to call for help." But Sato's eyes were distant, focused on the black void through the periscope. "There's no one left to help us," he replied softly. The crew had already surrendered, and now they were waiting for the ocean to deliver its final judgment. The decision had been made. It wasn't a battle or a fight. It was surrender. But it wasn't to the enemy. It was to the ocean, to fate, to the choices they had made. Okada stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Captain, I'm requesting permission to attempt a surface maneuver. We can't stay down here any longer." There was a long pause before Sato finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Permission granted, Okada. His shoulders sagged as he spoke the words. The crew moved into action, but it was too late. The submarine had already begun to buckle under the pressure. The depth gauge spun, the hull groaning, and the sonar screamed as if the ocean itself was crying. "It's too late," Tanabe shouted, her voice breaking as the hull cracked. Water began to seep in. The final decision had been made, but not by them. The water had entered, slowly, quietly, but inevitably. The Cory was sinking, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. In the stillness, they heard it. Another ping. The enemy had returned, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was a distant echo. The destroyer above them was only a memory now, just as they had become a ghost ship drifting in the deep. Tanabe's voice trembled as she reported, "The sonar. It's still picking up something." Sato turned slowly to look at her, his face unreadable. "We're already lost," he said. "What matters now is how we face it." Okada nodded grimly, taking one last look at the crew. "We face it together." The last sonar ping echoed through the room, a sound of the world above them, so far and distant. The ocean had swallowed them whole, but they were still alive. For now, the Cory sank, slowly, silently, and without resistance. No explosions, no firefights, just the slow, inevitable pull of the ocean. The crew gathered in the control room, their hands pressed to the walls, their eyes closed. They had done everything they could. Sato, in the end, said nothing. His mind was already somewhere else. Somewhere far from the submarine, far from the war. As the pressure mounted, and the water began to fill the vessel, Okada whispered, "I thought we were meant to fight, Captain." Sato's voice, once commanding, was now soft, resigned. "Fighting is something we do until we have nothing left to fight for." And with that, the lights flickered. The hum of the submarine systems faded, and the crew was swallowed by the silence of the ocean. The water inside the Cory was rising slowly but steadily. The once proud submarine that had carried them through oceans and through battles was now a tomb, its corridors filled with the sound of water creeping into every compartment. The lights flickered one last time, casting a dim red glow over the crew's faces. The air was thick with a kind of quiet surrender, the kind that comes only when there's nothing left to fight for. Captain Sato stood motionless by the periscope, his hand resting on the cold steel. His thoughts, distant and numb, were no longer of the war or of survival. They were of something simpler, something human. The faces of his family, the boy who once called him father. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, not to steady himself, but to remember the warmth of life before the war. The ocean outside, silent and infinite, claimed him as much as it had claimed the Cory. The last breath of the crew was not one of struggle but of acceptance. The steady rise of water was no longer a threat. It was inevitable. Okada stood in front of the crew, his face pale but calm. "It's time," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Well, face it together, as men, as soldiers, as a crew." Mika did not answer, her gaze lost on the sonar screen, which now only flickered faintly in the growing darkness. Moro stood still, his broad shoulders slumping as if he could no longer hold the weight of the ocean on his own. It was strange how the deepest waters felt less terrifying than the emptiness that had settled over them all. They had fought so hard, but now there was no enemy, only the ocean's eternal embrace. Sato's voice, hoarse and soft, broke the silence. "We have done all we could. The war is no longer ours." As the water rose higher, the crew's movements slowed. The submarine's groans and creaks were the only sound, until there was nothing but the soft lapping of water at their feet. The walls of the Cory felt like an ancient thing now worn and tired, much like the men inside. "Mika, her voice cracking, broke the stillness. "What happens now?" Sato did not answer right away, but when he spoke, his voice was soft. "Now, we wait together." Okada nodded, turning to the others. Moro, still silent, glanced at the others, his expression unreadable. Finally, Okada spoke once more. "We all gave our lives to this war, but we don't have to give our souls to it." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Sato smiled faintly. "No. The ocean will take them." The crew had accepted it. Their fate had been sealed the moment they sank into the depths. Sato looked at his men, his comrades, and saw in their faces the same quiet resolve he had long felt but never expressed. He knew this was the end, but there was something beautiful in the stillness, something almost sacred in the way they would face it. The submarine began to list, water now up to their necks, and Sato moved to the periscope one last time. He gazed at the ocean above, as if it could provide some final answer. Okada, standing by, spoke softly. "Captain, we're ready." Sato exhaled slowly, his shoulders heavy but his heart light. "No one is ever really ready for this." He turned to the crew. "But we face it together." As the last of the air began to slip away, Sato allowed himself to listen to the silence, to the ocean that had claimed them. There was no noise, no last attack, just the peaceful stillness of surrender. The submarine, broken and filled with water, finally ceased its slow descent. The crew, now submerged, did not struggle. They had given up their fight long ago. Their bodies were still, but their souls, they were free. As the final echoes of the Cory's mechanical systems went silent, Sato closed his eyes, feeling the pull of the ocean. The war was over. There was nothing left but this. The deep silence of the ocean was broken only by the occasional creak of metal as the Cory drifted, now lifeless, through the black abyss. The submarine, a once proud war machine, had become little more than a tomb of steel and memories. Beneath the waves, there was no distinction between day and night, only the cold, the darkness, and the distant echo of lost time. In this moment, there was no enemy, no war, no command. The only thing that remained was the ocean. The sea, with its vast, indifferent expanse, had claimed the Cory and its crew. Captain Sato's thoughts wandered aimlessly, now like drifting flotsam separated from the life he once knew. Maybe the ocean does belong to no one. He mused quietly, his voice little more than a whisper beneath the waves. It wasn't a surrender. It was an understanding. The deep had swallowed them whole, and now they were part of it. Forever. In the silence of the ocean's depths, memories resurfaced. Sato's mind wandered back to the past. His first days aboard a ship, the pride he felt as a young officer, the thrill of commanding men, and the honor of serving his country. But all those memories, once sharp and crisp, had blurred into one overwhelming weight. A weight of lives taken, of choices made, and of an empire that no longer existed. The Cory had long since lost its purpose. Okada had once asked him to surrender, and in this moment, Sato realized that the true surrender was not to the enemy, but to time itself. The relentless ticking of a clock that counted the moments of his life. Now gone. How many of us are left to remember? He wondered, staring into the black ocean. The sea had no answer. It simply moved on, as it always had. As the Cory continued its slow descent into the deep, Sato's mind drifted through the memories of war. The faces of men he had commanded, the faces of those he had lost, blurred like smoke, vanishing in the vast expanse of the ocean. He remembered the oath he swore, the ideals he once held with unwavering conviction. Duty, honor, and country, he thought. But those words now seemed hollow in the face of the sea's indifferent embrace. The ocean had not taken them for what they had done. It had taken them for who they had become. There was no enemy here, only the overwhelming quiet of the depths. And in that silence, the truth was clear. The quarry was just another casualty of a war that no longer had any meaning. The quarry had reached the end of its journey, and so too had the crew. Sato stood one last time by the periscope, his reflection now nearly indistinguishable from the water outside. The ocean had become the only thing left to see. And there, in the distance, was a faint light. Not a ship, not a sign of life, but simply a glimmer, a fleeting trace of something beyond the deep. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was nothing at all. But in that moment, Sato allowed himself to believe that the journey hadn't been in vain. The war, the pain, the choices, they had all led to this point, and they would remain here, in the silent embrace of the sea. He exhaled one final breath, not in fear, but in acceptance. The ocean had taken them, but it had not taken their memories. In the end, there was no explosion, no grand final act, just the slow, inevitable sinking into the dark. The quarry was gone, and with it, the crew. The sea had taken them, but it had also given them something in return. Peace. The memory of their lives, their choices, and their sacrifices would be lost to time. But for now, they were free. In the quiet of the ocean, there was only the endless sound of water, moving as it always had, indifferent to the fleeting lives that had passed beneath it. The sea would continue its rhythm, the crew's final echo fading into nothing. The quarry drifted deeper still, now a forgotten relic of a war that had long since faded from the surface world. The ocean, vast and cold, held it in its embrace. The submarine systems had long since gone silent, the crew's bodies still, but the sea continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent their passing. For Captain Sato, the end had come not with a single violent act, but with a slow erosion of meaning, of time, and of purpose. The silence of the ocean became all-encompassing. He wondered, in the stillness, whether they had ever truly belonged to the world above, or if they had always been destined to drift here, beneath the waves, waiting for the moment when they would be forgotten. The ocean, with its unfathomable depths, had claimed everything. Time, memory, and duty had all dissolved into the eternal blue. The quarry, once a symbol of military might, had become a forgotten ghost in the dark. But to Sato, it wasn't the war that had claimed him. It was the deep, quiet truth of the sea, where nothing remained but the endless flow of water and the lingering echo of lives once lived. As the quarry descended into the silent depths, memories of the crew's voices, their laughter, their arguments, their quiet moments of reflection, faded like echoes in the water. There was nothing now but the quiet pulse of the deep sea, the creaking of the submarine's metal shell as it surrendered to the weight of the ocean. In the stillness, Sato's thoughts began to blur. He remembered his son's face, the warmth of his wife's embrace, the moments of humanity that seemed so distant now. But those memories, too, were beginning to dissolve, like fading echoes in an empty room. He had once believed that duty, honor, and the pride of a nation would guide him to the end, but now he realized that those ideals were fleeting. The true constant, the only thing that would outlast them all, was the ocean. The crew had not fought for victory or glory. They had fought to survive, to hold on to something that felt real, even as the world above them crumbled. And now, in the silent depths, that fight had come to an end. There was no pain in this ending, no struggle, only quiet. Sato could almost hear the whispers of the ocean itself, a language older than the war, older than the men who fought. The sea held its secrets close, swallowing the cries of the past with each wave, each heartbeat. He could hear the echoes of his own voice, the commands he had given, the orders he had followed, but those words no longer carried weight. In the ocean, there was no past or future. There was only the present, only the now, and that was all they had left. Sato wondered if the ocean remembered, if it held the stories of every ship that had sunk, every sailor who had gone down with their vessel. The quarry and its crew were no different. They had been part of the ocean before they had ever set sail. And now, as their lives faded into the deep, they became one with it again. Their stories would not be told, their sacrifices not remembered, but the ocean would carry them, just as it had carried so many others. There would be no monument to their lives, no ceremony to mark the end of the Cory and its crew. They would not be remembered by the world they left behind. The ocean had taken them, and in its depth, they were lost. But there was a strange peace in that loss. The Cory had become one with the sea, and so too had its crew. Their journey had ended not with a bang, but with a soft final drift into the deep. Sato's last thoughts were of the family he would never see again, of the country he had served, and of the men who had followed him to the very edge of the world. They were all gone now, but their sacrifice had been real, and their journey had meaning. Even if the ocean would never acknowledge them, they would always have each other. And that was enough. The ocean, vast and eternal, would continue its rhythm, indifferent to the fleeting lives that passed through its depths. But Sato knew that their stories, though forgotten by history, would never truly fade, for in the depths of the ocean there was a memory that no storm could erase, and so the ocean continues, indifferent to the lives that pass beneath it. The Cory, once a proud symbol of war, is now just another ship lost to time. But for those who journeyed with it, there is no final farewell. There is only the deep, eternal tide, which carries them into the depths where memory and time lose their meaning. In the quiet beneath the waves, the crew of the Cory lives on, not in the stories told by men, but in the rhythm of the ocean itself. And for Sato, that was enough.